They thought caging human children would be easy, a simple act of dominance, another reminder that the galaxy belonged to them. But the silence that followed was not submission. It was the stillness before a storm. Every alien eye saw it, the trembling fear in their own ranks, the whispers spreading like wildfire. What happens when humans are pushed this far? Those cages didn't just hold children. They held the last threads of innocence, the last reason for mercy. And when you steal that from humanity, you do not win. You awaken something older, fiercer, unstoppable. The guards laughed. The officers celebrated. The Empire believed it had broken us. They didn't hear the footsteps. They didn't see the shadows gathering. They didn't understand that the very act of chaining our young had already sealed their fate. Because you can wound us, starve us, even burn our worlds. But cage our children? That is the one mistake you do not survive. The boy's laughter was the first thing Commander Elias Hale remembered when he woke each morning. It lingered even now, echoing faintly in memory, though the sound itself had been stolen. His son, Adam, was only 8 years old when the Empire came. Back on Earth, before the war reached their skies, Elias had been a teacher, not a soldier, not a strategist, just a man who taught history to children who believed wars belonged to the past. His days were filled with chalk dust, wide-eyed questions, and the warmth of a family that made the chaos of the universe feel distant. He had never wanted glory. He had never wanted to fight. But the galaxy didn't care about what humans wanted. When the Empire's ships tore into the Sol system, the first things they took were not planets or armies or resources. They took children. Elias never forgot the broadcast, the alien envoy standing tall, mechanical voice booming across every human channel. "Surrender, or watch your future vanish." The words alone might not have broken him, but the sight of Adam, wide-eyed, confused, caged behind shimmering alien barriers, burned into his mind and hollowed something deep within. That was the day Elias Hale ceased being a teacher. That was the day he became something else. For years afterward, he lived two lives. Outwardly, he was a soldier pressed into service like countless others, carrying a rifle too heavy and wearing armor that never quite fit. Inwardly, he was a father with only one mission: find his son, free the children, and make the Empire regret the mistake it had made. The galaxy underestimated humanity. They thought of us as fragile, fractured, endlessly distracted by our own quarrels. They had studied our wars but not our hearts. They measured our weapons but not our will. And so, when they caged our children, they believed humanity would bow. Instead, humanity waited, trained, bled. Elias rose quickly, not because he sought command, but because men and women around him saw something burning in his eyes. In him, they recognized the reflection of their own losses. Sons and daughters ripped away, siblings vanished into alien ships, innocence shattered. They followed him not because he ordered them, but because his silence carried a promise: that no cage in this galaxy was strong enough to keep humanity's children from coming home. And so whispers began to spread. Soldiers who fought beside him told stories of Elias Hale, the teacher turned warrior. Aliens began to hear them too. They spoke his name with unease, wondering how far one man would go. But Elias wasn't alone. Humanity itself was changing. Across colonies and starships, across battlefields scarred by plasma fire, there was a quiet unification unlike anything seen in Earth's long history. The wars of nations and borders seemed trivial now. There was only one line that mattered: humanity against those who dared cage its future. Still, Elias knew what many dared not speak aloud. The Empire was vast. Its fleets blackened the skies. Its armies numbered in the billions. For every human victory, 10 more worlds seemed to fall under alien banners. And somewhere out there, hidden in some fortress, buried in some labyrinth of cages, Adam was waiting. That thought haunted him as much as it sustained him. It gave his every action weight, his every order fire. Each morning, as he strapped on the armor and slung the rifle across his back, he reminded himself he wasn't fighting for conquest, or revenge, or even survival. He was fighting for the children who had no weapons, no voice, no way to fight back. The war was not just about freedom. It was about proving a truth the galaxy had forgotten. That humanity's greatest weapon was not its ships or its soldiers, but its unyielding refusal to let its children be stolen. And though Elias had yet to find Adam, he carried with him a certainty that grew sharper with every battle. The Empire's arrogance had already sealed its fate. Because humanity would never stop, not until every last cage was broken. And when that day came, Elias knew the galaxy itself would tremble. The first real chance came on a nameless moon orbiting a gas giant the Empire barely bothered to chart. The Empire called it Sector 96 Delta, but to humans, it became known simply as the Cinder Moon, because nothing survived there long. The outpost wasn't special. A supply depot, a few communication towers, a detachment of guards, but intelligence whispered that deep beneath its blackened crust, transport ships carried the youngest captives. Children. Human children. Elias Hale had seen the reports. Grainy images, intercepted manifests, testimonies from broken prisoners. He studied them in silence until the screen blurred and his hands shook. Then he gave the order without hesitation. "We take the Cinder Moon." No one argued, no one needed to. The approach was brutal. Their fleet was small, a ragtag formation of retrofitted freighters and warships scavenged from wreckage. Against an Empire's armada, it should have been laughable. Yet, humans didn't fight wars the way the Empire expected. The aliens favored overwhelming numbers, brute force, precision drills. Humanity relied on something messier: improvisation, misdirection, and a willingness to gamble everything on a single impossible shot. As the Cinder Moon came into view, Elias stood on the command deck of the Resolute, watching enemy patrols weave like shadows across the gas giant's glow. 3 minutes until detection," murmured Lieutenant Vargas, her voice taut. Elias nodded, eyes fixed. Good. That's all we need at his signal. The fleet split. Decoys broke formation, powered down to appear as drifting debris. Fighters clung to freighters like barnacles, hidden from scanners until the last second. Every move designed to trick the Empire into thinking they faced a smaller, weaker force. For a few breaths, it worked. The enemy formation hesitated, unsure if what they saw was worth attention. That hesitation was all humanity needed. "Now," Elias whispered. Engines roared. Fighters detached and streaked forward like sparks across the void. Freighters disgorged hidden cannons. The Empire's first line of ships scrambled too late, caught in a storm of missiles and rail fire. It was not a clean battle. Humanity never fought clean battles. It was chaos. Brilliant, terrifying chaos. Elias watched as one of their ships, the Iron Dawn, broke formation and hurled itself directly into the enemy flagship. The explosion tore the darkness apart, and for a heartbeat, the battlefield fell silent. On the comms, Elias heard the voice of Captain Wren before the feed cut. Tell them it was for the kids." The words slammed into Elias like a blade. He closed his eyes, steadying himself, then gave the next order. "All wings, drive them into the moon." And so they did. The surface of the Cinder Moon was hell itself. Rivers of molten glass, storms of ash, air unfit to breathe. Yet beneath it lay the outpost. Dropships cut through the storm, landing hard. The soldiers who emerged were not the polished legions of the Empire. They were miners, farmers, teachers. Human beings who had learned to fight because there was no other choice. Elias led them personally. Rifle in hand, boots sinking into scorched ground, he advanced into the storm of plasma fire. Around him, men and women moved like shadows, using the terrain the aliens avoided, finding cover in places no strategist would consider. The outpost loomed, metal spires half buried in black rock. Alarms blared. Alien guards poured out, confident in their superior numbers. But they had never seen how humans fought when their children were at stake. Vargas dropped an enemy with a single shot, then shouted over the comms, "Detonation charges ready." "Set them on the north tower," Elias ordered. "We don't need to hold ground. We just need to break them." Explosions rippled through the outpost. Structures toppled. Aliens scrambled to contain the chaos, but every move they made was countered by something reckless, something human. Soldiers doubled back, feigned retreats, lured enemies into kill zones. They made disorder into a weapon. Through smoke and fire, Elias pushed deeper. His visor crackled with interference. His lungs burned in the toxic air. Still, he pressed on. Every door he breached, every corridor he cleared, he asked the same silent question. Is Adam here? But he wasn't. Instead, Elias found other children, huddled in shimmering cages, eyes wide with terror. Some were no older than 5, their faces streaked with ash and tears. He smashed the first barrier with his rifle butt. Sparks erupted, the cage collapsing in a hiss of energy. Tiny arms clung to him instantly, and for a moment Elias couldn't breathe. "Easy," he whispered, voice breaking. "You're safe now. You're going home." The words weren't entirely true. The moon was still burning, the battle still raging. But to speak them aloud was to make them real, to promise the universe itself that humanity would not fail. The extraction was chaos. Alien reinforcements thundered down, ships blotting out the sky. Elias and his soldiers dragged the freed children into dropships as plasma fire scorched the landing pads. Vargas was hit. She fell hard, smoke rising from her armor. Elias pulled her to her feet, half dragging her to the ramp. "They won't stop," she gasped, blood bubbling at her lips. "They don't have to," Elias said grimly, forcing her aboard. "We just need to." Behind them, the outpost detonated, fire ripping through metal, shockwaves shaking the moon itself. The Empire's reinforcements faltered, momentarily blinded by the destruction. That moment was enough. The human fleet broke orbit, battered but alive, dropships clinging to their hulls like lifeboats. Inside those ships, dozens of children wept and clung to strangers who had become their protectors. Elias sat among them, armor scorched, rifle across his knees. He scanned the small faces, his heart tightening. Adam was not there. But it didn't matter. Not yet. These children were alive, and the Empire had learned something it would never forget. Cage human children, and you ignite a war without limits. News of the raid spread faster than light. Across occupied worlds, whispers grew into roars. In alien halls of power, commanders demanded explanations. How could a species so fractured, so outnumbered, strike so deep into Imperial territory? But it wasn't strategy they feared. It was resolve. Reports described how human soldiers fought. Reckless, unpredictable, as if death itself was an afterthought. Alien analysts shook their heads, unable to explain why humans would throw entire ships away for a single chance, why they would risk annihilation for children, not even their own. They didn't understand that in humanity's eyes, all children were their own. Elias knew the Empire would strike back harder. They would hunt him, brand him a war criminal, promise his death on every channel. He knew the fleet that followed would be 10 times larger, the reprisals merciless. But he also knew this: the galaxy was watching. And for the first time, they weren't just seeing humans as prey. They were seeing them as something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something unstoppable. Yet, even as cheers rose on liberated ships, even as children slept for the first time in years without bars around them, Elias felt the hollow weight inside. His son was still out there, still caged. And somewhere in the Empire's endless sprawl, Adam was waiting. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle and looked out at the stars, their cold light shimmering against the void. "This isn't over," he whispered. And in that silence, beneath the stars, it felt less like a statement and more like a vow. Because the Empire had taken children, and humanity had only just begun to answer. The Empire did not forgive humiliation. Weeks after the raid on the Cinder Moon, Elias Hale's fleet was hunted like prey across half a dozen systems. Every outpost, every listening station, every ally that dared offer fuel or shelter was burned to ash. And then came the message. A transmission projected across every human channel. "We hold the children. We hold them still. Surrender your fleets, or watch them perish." The images that followed nearly broke him. Hundreds of cages, stretching into the horizon of some alien world, each one filled with small, fragile forms. Among them, Elias swore he saw Adam. Thinner, older, but alive. It was a trap. It was always a trap. But traps could be broken. Elias didn't summon a council. He didn't ask permission. He gathered his commanders, pointed to the star chart, and said the words that would carry humanity into legend. "We take them back. All of them. Tonight." The Empire's fortress world was a spiked crown of metal and fire, defended by fleets so vast they blotted out the stars. No sane commander would assault it. No strategist would risk it. But humans were never known for sanity in the face of injustice. The plan was madness itself, a frontal assault to draw the Empire's fleet, while a handful of strike teams slipped beneath the defenses in retrofitted freighters disguised as salvage. Elias would lead one of those teams. His orders were simple: breach the cages, free the children, and hold until extraction. Or die trying. The assault began with fire. Human ships poured from the void, hurling everything they had in a storm of missiles, rail shot, and desperate fury. The Empire answered with annihilation, fleets converging like wolves on a wounded prey. The stars themselves seemed to burn. And in that storm, unnoticed, the strike freighters slipped through. The fortress corridors were a maze of steel and alien glyphs. Sirens wailed. Guards poured in from every direction. But Elias drove forward, rifle spitting fire, boots pounding the ground. His soldiers moved like ghosts, clearing rooms with brutal precision, pushing deeper into the labyrinth. Then, the cages. Rows upon rows of them, stacked like cargo filled with human children. Their eyes widened as the soldiers burst through, weapons raised, armor scorched. Some cried out, some fell silent, too stunned to believe what they were seeing. "Break them open!" Elias roared. His voice carried above the gunfire, above the alarms. Barriers shattered one after another. Children poured into waiting arms, clutching at soldiers, weeping into their armor. For the first time in years, hope filled the air. But hope came at a price. "Commander!" Vargas gasped over comms. "Enemy reinforcements inbound." Hundreds. "They're sealing the exits." Elias turned, scanning the endless rows of children. He knew the truth instantly. They couldn't all be moved in time. Unless... "Blow the eastern walls," he ordered. "Make a new path." His soldiers hesitated. To breach the fortress wall was suicide, but Elias's voice was iron. "Do it!" Charges detonated. Fire tore open the steel, exposing the black void beyond. Emergency shields flickered to life, barely holding the atmosphere in. And through that gap, Elias saw it. The silhouette of the Resolute, scarred but alive, dropping into the storm to haul them out. "Get the children aboard!" Elias shouted. "Now!" The soldiers formed a living shield, standing shoulder to shoulder as waves of aliens surged. Plasma bolts ripped the air, armor cracked, men and women fell, buying seconds with their lives. Elias fought at the front, rifle empty, switching to his blade. Every strike was fueled by years of loss, every movement a vow carved into flesh and blood. A bolt struck his shoulder. Pain flared white, but he did not fall. Another slammed into his chest plate, cracking it, driving him to one knee. Still, he rose, dragging a child behind him, forcing himself onward. Behind him, the cages stood empty. Ahead of him, the ramp of the Resolute glowed like salvation. And then he saw him, Adam. His son stood among the rescued, smaller than Elias remembered, eyes too old for his age. For a heartbeat, father and son locked eyes through smoke and fire. "Dad!" the boy cried, voice breaking. Elias surged forward, every wound forgotten. He reached him, arms wrapping around the child he had searched galaxies for. For that instant, the war fell silent. But silence does not last in battle. The aliens surged again, endless, relentless. Elias turned, shielding Adam with his own body, his blade flashing in the dark. Vargas dragged children up the ramp, screaming at Elias to fall back. He didn't. He couldn't. Not yet. Because behind the walls, deeper in the fortress, he could still hear the faint cries of cages not yet broken. He met Vargas's gaze, blood streaking his armor, eyes burning with fire. "Get them out," he said. "All of them. All." And with that, Elias turned back into the storm. The last thing Adam saw before the ramp sealed was his father, standing alone in the breach, blade raised against a tide of alien soldiers that seemed to stretch forever. A single human figure, defiant against the darkness. And then the ramp closed. The Resolute roared away into the void, engines screaming, carrying hundreds of freed children into the stars. Behind it, the fortress burned, explosions rippling through its spires. The Empire thought caging human children would break humanity. Instead, it awakened something they could never contain. And as the galaxy watched the flames consuming the Empire's stronghold, a question spread across every world, whispered with awe and fear alike. If this is what humans do for their children, what will they do for the future of their kind? The silence after war is always the loudest. Where once there was fire and thunder, now only drifting embers remained. Alien wreckage spun like broken teeth in orbit, the cages torn open, the ships gutted from within. And in the middle of it all, the battered silhouette of a single human vessel drifted. Scarred, cracked, but unbroken. Inside, the rescued children slept. Exhaustion had taken them at last, their small chests rising and falling in uneven rhythm. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, they weren't trembling. They weren't whispering in the dark, asking if their mothers or fathers would ever find them. They were safe. And for humanity, that was enough. The galaxy, however, was not silent. Reports spread like wildfire across the stars. Fleets that once sneered at Earth now whispered of them with something different. Not mockery, not dismissal. Fear. Awe. They fought for children, alien envoys murmured. Not soldiers. Not resources. Children. Because in the cold calculus of empire, children were nothing but leverage, tools for obedience. But to humans, children were everything. That truth shattered the illusion of alien superiority more than any weapon could. The battered captain stood on his bridge, looking out at the stars. His uniform was torn, his voice hoarse from hours of barking orders. But his eyes burned with something unyielding. He knew the galaxy had seen what happened here. He knew it would echo. Because this wasn't just about one rescue. It was a declaration. Humanity would not be broken. Not by cages, not by chains, not by the cruelty of empires that thought fear was stronger than love. Somewhere, on a dozen alien homeworlds, parents held their children tighter, remembering what they had witnessed. Somewhere, enslaved species whispered Earth's name like a promise. Somewhere, generals of the Empire stared at shattered fleets and realized they were not the apex predators they believed themselves to be. The captain closed his eyes, hearing again the voices of the rescued, the laughter of children, thin but real, filling the ship's halls like sunlight piercing through storm clouds. That sound meant more than medals, more than vengeance, more than victory. It meant humanity still had something worth fighting for. The galaxy thought caging children would break Earth's spirit. Instead, it ignited it. And from this day on, no tyrant, no empire, no predator among the stars would forget the cost of underestimating humanity's heart. Because they had seen the truth written in fire and steel. You can shackle armies, you can burn cities, you can even cage children, but you will never cage humanity.